What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Gen Z Money Podcast, where we turn financial peace to your reality. I'm your host, James Bowman, and today, guys, we have such an amazing interview for this episode. I interviewed Darius and Courtney, the creators of Kidvestor. Now, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Kidvestor, but it is honestly one of the best things I have found in a very long time. It's their goal is to teach children financial literacy. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you may be like me, and I didn't get any financial literacy growing up, right? I remember back in high school, I literally had one finance class, and I think it was my senior year, and it was for maybe a couple months, and that was it. And we didn't go over anything about investing, insurance, the meat and potatoes of what it is to really live a fulfilling life. So I really wanted to bring these guys on because they are just awesome. They're so pleasant to talk to. They have so much knowledge going through their head. And it was such a phenomenal interview. And hopefully, if you have children that you want to teach financial literacy to, their content is where you need to be. So with that being said, guys, I'm not going to get too much down. I want them to be able to tell their story, where it's coming, where it's going. But I hope you guys enjoy the interview. But let's go ahead and get into it. Hey, Courtney, Darius, welcome to the Gen Z Money Podcast. How are you guys doing this evening?
We're doing good. How are you?
Excellent.
Doing amazing. I tell you, when I found you guys' content, and the message you guys are doing with this whole Kidvestor thing, it absolutely blew me away. I mean, it's always great to see people, instead of targeting the older audience, we start them very, very young, because I think children are literally the universe's best sponge. Mm-hmm. So that's why I wanted to bring you guys on. And of course, when it's people that look like us, we're talking to people like us, it hits home even harder. So again, I just really appreciate you guys coming on tonight to have this conversation.
Thank you for having us. We're honored and privileged.
Yeah, we're grateful to be here.
The pleasure's all mine. So let's get started. Courtney, let's start with you, because I always like to go back to the beginning when it comes to finances, because I think you always have to look at the base on where things are starting to build. So how was money talked about and viewed as you grew up?
So I was actually fortunate. So I came from what I consider a middle class family. So we weren't like struggling, but we weren't rich either. We were okay, and so I was privileged to have my parents. They taught me basics. They taught me how to save. They taught me how to budget. So I was actually fortunate to kind of have some exposure in that regard, but that was pretty much it. It didn't really go beyond, okay, you need to save a little, you need to make sure you don't spend more than you make. Mm-hmm. And so they would teach me little ways like that, with allowance and stuff like that. So that was my first introduction to financial literacy or money management.
Okay, what about you, Darius? How was money talked about and viewed as you grew up?
Probably the basics as well. What I can remember most is, so I'm from Alabama. There's a lot of grass, and me and my little brother, we begin to cut grass, during the summers and fall and stuff like that. And I remember my dad, we would get a check, but my dad would pretty much chauffeur us because we're too young at the time. He would chauffeur us, and he would also provide gas for the lawnmowers. And so that just taught me really to be making more than you're spending, in a sense. Because I remember when at first he was paying for everything out of his own pocket, and he would let us make our money. But after a little while, he began to realize, like, I'm not helping them by not really, teaching them the nuances. And so, the basics, just make sure you're bringing in more than you're putting out and stuff like that. So I'm grateful for my upbringing as well, but that was it, just the bare minimum. So, yeah.
But you know what? I want to look at the light side of that story because it sounds like your father kind of um, encouraged the entrepreneurship and the work ethic that you guys are putting in, even if we can say it wasn't, as profitable as it could be. It was less about the profit and more about what are these young men learning. They're learning how to work hard. They're learning how to make an honest living. They're learning how to provide for customers. And I think those lessons are totally worth missing out on a little profit as you grew up. And I'm sure your dad probably didn't mind, the gas money, because that's a very small investment for such a large lesson to learn so early.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's go back to you, Courtney. Where did your financial literacy, so you said that you always kind of knew how to budget and save and the basics, right? Where did you begin to learn about investing and growing your wealth?
Probably 7 years ago. After I graduated high school, after I graduated college, probably actually while I was in graduate school. So again, I had a basic knowledge of just money. Okay, don't spend more than you make. But we all know as we get older, it's a lot more, more than that. I had no idea about retirement. I knew nothing about investing in the stock market, investing in real estate, really until I was already in graduate school, already had accumulated some student loan debt. I learned my lesson in graduate school. I didn't repeat that. So I only had undergraduate loans at the time. And then I found, when I was working, I found a tuition reimbursement program. So the only thing I knew was, okay, I don't want to just work to pay bills and die. Like there's gotta be more. I just don't want to keep doing this every day. So how can I start making some moves to really kind of buy back my time? And so I actually started investing in the stock market while I was in graduate school. And then a few years into our marriage, we started investing in real estate together. And then our own journey spearheaded, like, why didn't we learn about this in school? Why didn't we learn about the intricacies of investing and how you're really losing money because of inflation if you just have your money saved in a bank account not working for you? And that's when Kidvestors was born, because we were like, well, we may have started late, but our children, because we have 2 children now, we don't want that to be their story, and we don't want that to be anyone else's story. So then that's kind of how Kidvestors was born.
Yeah.
And what was your college degree in?
Undergrad, pre-medicine, biology. I wanted to be a doctor. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And then I was like, nope, I don't want to do all of that schooling. And so then I went to graduate school because I wanted to go in. I got my MPA. And then I focused on, human resources. And I thought I wanted to be a director of human resources and all of that stuff. And I was like, nope, don't want to do that either. So real estate took off for us. And so we ended up going into that full time. And then he quit his job, and then I quit my job. And then, yeah.
Yeah, I want to get into that real estate.
There's a lot.
I love me some real estate, right? So I love talking about real estate. We're going to get into that a little bit later. So Dariuss, do you remember where you began learning your financial literacy?
It kind of started when I graduated from my undergrad, Auburn University of Montgomery. Well, something had happened. So I was the student government president at at Auburn University at Montgomery. Now, I had a colleague, he was the university president at Auburn main campus. So we had probably an 8,000 to 10,000 student difference. Anyways, so when I graduated, I had, some accolades and things like that. And I remember my colleague, he graduated, he didn't have any accolades. And I remember so yeah, of course that question comes, what are you going to do? And then he mentions oh, I'm just going to go work at ChickfilA. And so I'm like, what? I didn't say that out loud, but in my head, I'm like, what? And so next thing you know, fast forward a few months later, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm seeing he's working for ChickfilA, but He's like in the upper admin. Come to find out, his dad was one of the founding fathers of Chick-fil-A, right? So that taught me, okay, I may have had like nice kind of shiny accolades, but he had his dad go and lay a path before him so that he would have a job. He didn't have to get all the shiny accolades, but he had somewhere to go, somewhere to work that would pay him finally, right? So that was my first introduction. And then my wanting to serve my community and things like that, I wanted a pastor. I just realized, to be honest, pastors don't make nothing. I know you guys, we may see like the tabloids and stuff like that talk about, the church took this and that, but that's like saying all Black people steal. It's like when you really look at the statistics, right? It's not true, right? So just looking at that and realizing, okay, if I want to serve my community in unmitigated fashion, I need to figure out a way of passive income. And when we first moved here in Louisville, there was a dilapidated house right by where we were staying. I remember going out every day looking at that house, and I would preach to Courtney about what we needed to do to buy that house.
We never bought it.
And we never bought it. But that's kind of where it began. That's where the wheel began to turn. Okay, Darius, if you want to serve your community, that means you need to have money, so you don't necessarily have to work a 9 to 5, because if you work a 9 to 5, there's only 24 hours in a day. There's only so much real estate in your mind, which means that you need to free your hands to be able to serve. So I just gave you a really long answer to simply say, if I want to serve my community, I need passive income so that I can serve them fully and wholeheartedly, if that makes any sense.
No, that makes 100%. You said so many great things I kind of want to go back on. So the first question I have is, like, when he told you he was going to work at Chick-fil-A, do you think he was being facetious, or do you think he was just trying to be humble and just...
I think that was typical white boy stuff. So when I say white boy stuff, I'm gonna clarify it because I understand we got audience. I mean, like that's what he grew up in. So it's like a fish telling the fish is wet, right? It won't be like, what? I'm wet? No, like that's what he grew up in, right? So I don't think he was like being facetious or anything. I just think he was like, my dad's been working for Chick-fil-A this whole time, and like I'm, just going to follow in his footsteps.
I think he probably told you like it was obvious. Like, of course, I'm going to work for my dad's company.
Yeah, but he didn't mention it was his dad's company, right?
Oh,
he didn't.
Found out.
Yeah, so that's why I mean, like, I just think it was him. Like, he probably told everybody that, and probably 99.9 everybody that wasn't his family knew, like, thought like me, like, whoa, like that's. I guess that's where you want to start your career, putting together chicken sandwiches. But no, like his dad had laid a path from his dad had invested his time and resources in a way that his son is able to benefit from it. So yeah.
Yeah, and
I don't think he was being mean or anything like that. I just think it was like, yo, going to work for Pop. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, and I don't fault him. It doesn't sound like you guys fault him at all. I mean,
no.
I would too.
Recreate it.
I'm trying to get like
that. It. Like we're big on like trust fund babies. Like that is where I feel like the disconnect is, and why we're so passionate about Kidvestors, because especially in our culture, a lot of us didn't come from wealth or inheritance, or people who already have businesses and things in place that they could just hand over to us when we graduated. We weren't in that position. So we're in the generation now that we're creating that for the generation coming after us, and not just laying the foundation, but giving them the knowledge to replicate it.
Yeah. And also just realizing, like, I remember going to an Atlanta Hawks game when I was maybe 10 or 11. And that's when waffle fries, like I didn't realize Chick-fil-A was not big then, but his dad was probably busting his behind, building out this company, building out the infrastructure, figuring out waffle fries. And, me and Kirby, we're young at this time, but yeah, he's laying that groundwork. So it's that situation that made me realize, like, I may get in trouble for this, but nepotism isn't necessarily a bad thing, because if you start a company, right, I want my kids to benefit from it, right? In a sense like that. So yeah.
It's a really long answer, but hopefully you got our point.
Yeah.
No. I think the biggest takeaway that I really want the listeners to get from this is like, you didn't look at it and say, because I can't have it, he shouldn't either. Instead, you looked at it. You didn't look at it enviously. You looked at it as inspiration. It's because he has it, I want to do it. Right. And I want to pass that blessing on to my children. And I think that's a great message to really internalize for people, is like the fact that someone can do that. Someone can work high up in a company. That way they know as soon as their child graduates, they have an income, they have a job. Like that should be inspiration. And the word for it is privilege, but it didn't come from nothing. Like
there you go.
Come from nothing.
Right. And privilege is not a bad thing. I think sometimes people who weren't brought up in privilege kind of sometimes give privilege a negative connotation. Like, it's not a bad thing. I want my kids to be privileged. My kids will be privileged, but at the same time, I want them to be grounded, acknowledge their privilege, but and know that, okay, you did have some help, but to not look at it negatively.
And we have to realize pain can make you bitter or it can make you better. So to be honest, when I saw when I saw that LinkedIn a few months later, and I see like this dude, I don't even know the position, but I know for a fact that ain't entry level, like, right? That's not an entry level position. When I saw it, it could have rubbed me the wrong way. And if I'm honest, like it was it was some fighting in my heart, like, oh, like how in the world? I worked my butt off in college and all this and all these other things. But instead of that making me bitter, it's making me better. Respect this father. Okay, you put in work. You were, putting together chicken sandwiches and dropping waffle fries before Chick-fil-A was a thing, and you laid that path for your son. So I'm going to allow that to make me better, that pain to make me better instead of bitter. So yeah.
That's phenomenal, man. That is, man, oh my God, I'm loving this interview already, man. Okay, so let's get into the Kidvestors thing, right? Because I think that's like the main meat and potatoes that I really wanted to hit on. Let's put it out there. Whose idea was it?
It was his.
I don't remember. I don't remember.
So how it happened, because naturally we're entrepreneurs, so we're naturally always trying to think like, multiple streams of income, how can we make more, right? So we were in our bedroom and I was just like, how can we bring, another stream of passive like income? And, but we wanted to still be impactful. Like we didn't want to do something just because. He casually, is why he probably doesn't remember saying it, but I do. He casually was like, oh, let's do a kids book. And in my head, I was like, that is brilliant. A kids book about, of course, because our thing that we were, we dove first in was real estate together, at least. And so we were thinking, let's just do one real estate kids book. And so we started writing it. We started finding the illustrators and all that jazz. We have the discussion. We get ready to kind of assemble everything. And the illustrator was like, guys, I don't think people want to read about real estate before they go to bed. And we were like, he has a point, probably maybe a little boring topic. Even the way we wrote it, we thought it would be interesting. And so he was just giving us his feedback. Long story short, we started telling him what we really wanted to do. We really wanted to teach kids how to invest, how to manage money, blah, blah, blah. We wanted to target, our culture, because we don't have a lot of representation in that area. And then long story short, we were like, let's do a curriculum. So that's when it blossomed from just an idea of doing a storybook for, little kids to a full out curriculum for K through 12.
So why grade school? And I preface this question by like, I remember, at least I'm going to say 9 through 12. I really didn't care about anything they were teaching in school. And it was just me. It was just me personally. I was a really, really bad student, right? And so I remember having a personal finance class. It was a really, really bad personal finance class. It didn't teach.
You're lucky to even have one.
Yeah, we didn't have that.
We didn't have one at all.
So it was mandatory, but it didn't teach you anything important. It didn't teach you about taxes. It didn't teach you about debt management. I don't even remember what it taught you. That's why I think it was a really bad class. So can you guys talk a little bit about like why in grade school in particular?
That it's the only time where the government forces us to sit down and be still. Right? The way the Western education is, and pretty much I think this is world education now, is you sit still for a few hours out of the day. You get maybe 30 minutes to an hour of physical activity, but the majority of that day you are sitting down. You're commanded to sit down and learn. I don't know if that's the best way to do things, but it just is what it is. And so grade school, because that's the time. If we're learning, about algebra, and the Pythagorean theorem, why not learn about investing too? One of those two things are applicable to life and one of them isn't, right? So just realizing the opportunity at hand. And I'd say most importantly, realizing that the majority of people who really look like us are in the school systems, are in the public school system. And that is our goal, to get this information out in a way that is engaging. We use certain lingo, we use certain tools of engagement that really reach out and I feel like grabs the attention of our hearers. And we've done everything possible to really just attract and maintain that sort of engagement. There's an old saying in Alabama, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Our goal with Kidvestors is to make that water look as good as possible. The waters of investing, the waters of real estate, stocks, money management, and hopefully our young folks will drink from that well.
And secondly, I want to add on to that is I completely believe that a lot of us as adults would have made a lot less financial and some of us crippling mistakes had we known certain things earlier. Yeah. Like had we known about brokerage accounts and investing and money management, maybe a lot of us would have been less likely to sign for thousands of dollars at student loans at 18. Or maybe if we knew about debt management, we wouldn't have spent our refund checks on spring break. Or maybe had we known about investing, we would have invested some of our paycheck instead of blowing it on, the latest clothes, shoes, or whatever in our 20s, and have benefited from compound interest 10 years plus later in our 30s, and our retirement and brokerage accounts are looking fat. Had we known that information in our younger ages, and it progresses. So of course, our kindergartner is not going to start learning about index funds. They're going to learn their numbers. Then they're going to go to, addition and subtraction. And then what happens is they keep taking this advanced math, but they're not taking advanced math classes most of the time that they can actually use in the real world. And so we wanted to teach the algebra, that's cool, but also teach them how to open a checking account, how to manage their money, how to invest their money, how to invest in real estate, that 401ks are not the only option for retirements out there, like for retirement accounts, all of those things. Had we had that knowledge, I think a lot of us as adults would have been much further financially.
I mean, and that really relates back to what Darius was saying, where you're going to be in school anyways, right? You're going to spend 8 hours in school regardless. So instead of, and the odds of us cutting that time back and just cutting out all the BS that we don't think children need, it's a lot easier to replace it with stuff we think they do need. So I guess that definitely makes, I like that. I like that. It's like, because I feel like, at least in the Western culture, we can only control what we can control. And
Right.
so
There you go.
we have, and if we can't control, how long they go to school or how their time is spent most of the day, because, states require children to go to school a certain amount, we can at least try to control what they're consuming during that time.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's not a perfect answer to the solution, but it's the best we got so far, like trying to correct the school system. And then Courtney, you brought up a really, really good point. It's like we are asking children coming out of high school to make life-changing decisions
that they know nothing about.
We're asking them to go to school and to pick what they want to do for the rest of their life. And we want them to take out money and give them a blank check to do this. And I always say, like, college is not the place to try and figure out what you want to do. Like, you need to figure out what you want to do and then go to college if necessary.
I agree.
But unfortunately, that's not the world we live in right now. And do either of you, I want both of your opinions on this, do you think that we're able to change that anytime soon?
I think we're going in that direction anyway, slowly but surely. Again, having degrees myself, I want to be careful. I'm not that person like college is a scam. I really do believe that, if you desire to be certain things, college is necessary. You want to be a surgeon, you need to go to college. You want to be a lawyer, you need to go to college. But I would argue that in a lot of fields, unless you're in those high income fields like engineering, being a lawyer, being a doctor, then you end up in this cycle of, okay, I'm getting into all this debt to get a job, to use the job to pay off all the debt that I earned in school. And then most of the time, the entry-level positions, they don't even pay you nearly as much as the debt that you just borrowed from your student loan. And you just end up in this vicious cycle. But again, had we presented options and alternatives in trades and certifications and different ways to be financially successful instead of go to college, get a good job, I think a lot of kids or adults now would have had a far better outlook financially. That's just my opinion. So in short, I think it depends.
I mean, it does depend. It have to be drastic.
Right.
It had to be a drastic change. And, the point that you're basically making is like, if you learn financial literacy while in school, you'll realize like, okay, is it worth it to go $100,000 in debt for a $50,000 a year job? Maybe not. Is it worth going $50,000 in debt for a $200,000 a year job? Maybe we're definitely tipping the scales at that point, but you can't even begin to ask the question without some prior education. Exactly. Like you guys are talking about.
Exactly.
So from your experiences so far with this whole Kidvestor movement, what age do you suggest children begin to be introduced to finances?
As soon as they are able to understand how money works. So for some, that might be 6, for some, that might be 7. Like Darius said, he was a kid when he started, mowing grass. Even if it's something simple as, okay, if I earn $30 for this job, mowing grass, I don't need to spend the full 30. Maybe I need to put 10 aside in my investment account, another 10 or 5 to save or 10 to save. And then, that the rest I can spend on what I want. So as soon as they have that understanding, which I think is around, that first, second grade, 7, 8-year-old age range. What do you think?
I think early exposure is key. It almost becomes like my colleague when he graduated, and it was no big deal that he was, earning, $250,000 a year because this was his life, right? He wasn't being funny or anything. It just was what it was. I think, and then the last thing I'll say is when we first started Kidvestors, I'll never forget, there was this Italian kid. He was maybe 19 or 20, And he's just reaching out to us like crazy.
A week after we
week after we went public with everything. And he wanted to offer us a large sum of money. He was pretty much a shark, right? Now, of course, we said no, but I was just curious, like, with this guy being this young, I'm like, how do you have this much money at hand? It's like, at your age, like being 19 or 20, it's like, oh man, I was investing at 9 and 10 years old. He said my dad had me with him. And so I just think the earlier, the better. So these things kind of become natural to us to think qualitatively, to think through things, especially when it comes to finances. So the earlier, the better.
You know, when you say that, there's just one dilemma I come up to in my head, and you guys can maybe dispel that. It's like, so at least from what I've learned and what I plan when I'm teaching my siblings, I don't have children yet with my wife, but I do have younger siblings, and I'm teaching them the real basics, like you guys are talking about. You know, you need to save money, you need to spend money, and you need to give money. Those are the three things you can do with money primarily. When you teach a child something like saving, children are sponges and they amplify, right? So do you ever feel concerned that the things you're teaching your child at school or, you know, on YouTube or however, they're going to bring back home and it could cause strife in the home? Because let's be honest, like I think the last thing I saw was like 40% of Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency. So they have no savings. Mm-hmm. So when you have a child coming home saying, yeah, I'm saving this amount, do you ever think a parent who isn't financially literate might be like, why are they teaching my children that? Or
honestly, I haven't thought about that.
Yeah. I think that all conflict is not bad conflict.
Yeah.
Conflict can be healthy, right? So I think it's a good thing. Dave Chappelle makes a joke, right? He says he was just rich enough to live in like middle class white people. And he says, like, basically when he went to his friend's house, like all of their light switches and their plugs worked, right? And so what am I getting at?
That basically he wasn't exposed to certain things.
Yeah, it helped when he went to basically his friend's house. It helped him see like areas of improvement that he could make within his own home. I think he was raised by a single mom, right? So conflict can be healthy in the sense it's good. In fact, it happens. We contract right now with a few schools, and one of them, we have homework for them. Hey, go and ask your parents this. And what happens is
that's dangerous.
Like mortgage statements and stuff. Like,
what are your mortgage statements?
What are your property taxes?
Like, is this less than 25% of our gross income? Right? Like, and so they get to see these things, and what happens is the parents are seeing these things. They're seeing the sort of standards that we're trying to, teach the children, and it also helps expose the parents. So now the biggest blessing of all of this is that we have parents who are learning alongside of their children.
Yes.
Like, and it's already at an elementary school level, so they're learning just like their children, and they're giving us feedback, telling us what a blessing it is. They're buying investment properties, they're investing in stocks and things like that. They're developing mutual funds and things of that nature. So yeah,
it's having a domino effect. So while that could be a possibility, we've had more of the opposite. One of my favorite stories personally is the course, the kids that we hired to actually do the voice acting. After the kids finished that project, their parents opened up a brokerage account. Their parents were like, wow, it was so simple to understand. The parents were watching it and we're like, let me open up a brokerage account. And so they're asking us these questions and taking action off of a course that wasn't even designed for them in the first place, but because it's just so engaging to a beginner, regardless of the age, is causing a positive domino effect. And so that's what we love about it, is that it really, we also had the opportunity to do another interview, and the girl was saying how basically like this could really change the economy. Like imagine having financial literacy available, because through the public school system, right? Because not everyone has the luxury of going to a private school or whatever. But if we are able to get this curriculum into public schools, imagine the impact that it could have when all schools have this access and this information at no cost to the students and parents.
Yeah. So to summarize everything, to answer your question, all conflict does not have to be bad conflict. You can have good conflict where we realize we may be spending too much in this area. We may need to pull back in this area. What we may be spending too much money on liabilities instead of assets. So to answer your question, yeah, it does happen, and it's a good thing when it does, because it usually challenges us to kind of get better, because when you know better, we should do better. So yeah.
That's phenomenal, man. It's great to hear that again, it goes back to that inspiration over envy. They're getting inspired by their children. Like that's phenomenal, man. That is phenomenal. So, well, let me ask you this, right? Do you think, because there's I guess you could call it a conspiracy theory, or you can call it whatever you want, but there's a stigma that I kind of agree with, is like schools are not right now made to create entrepreneurs and high producing people. They're made to create workers. So do you think that contributes to why they try their hardest to keep personal finance out of the classroom, because they want to focus more on making a reliable worker rather than a high value investor or a high value producer?
I think it started out like that. And I agree to an extent, but I do see slowly, a shift happening. Recent stats, 25 states have actually introduced legislation to require a personal finance curriculum of sorts. Now they keep it very broad on what that looks like. So the 25 states, unfortunately, if there's a week of personal finance training, then that checks that box, right? So while they introduce legislation, I don't think it's as detailed as it should. Now, out of those 25 states, 10 of them will require a 1 semester elective that cannot be substituted for high school students. So 10 of 50 states by 2025 will require high school students to take 1 personal finance elective in order to graduate. So to go back to your question, I think it started out that way. And for the most part, it's still that way, but I do still see a small shift happening just based on recent news.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I actually just saw, it was either today or yesterday, that Florida just passed a bill requiring personal finance to be taught in the high school, which I thought was phenomenal, personally. So, all right, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to get both of you guys' take on it. We'll start with you, Dariuss. What do you think is the hardest part about teaching younger children about financial literacy?
You mean within the school system, or
in general? What is it about it? Are there any roadblocks you get when teaching children? Maybe it might be them not being able to focus, or them not being interested, or
okay. I would say the ability for to just teach. Unfortunately,
that's good.
Yeah. So with us kind of partnering with schools, I and our teachers, we find ourselves saying, "Hey, don't do this. Stop doing that. Please do this," right? And that can honestly distract. And so I wouldn't even say, because once we get into the lesson, they're all ears, but it's just a matter of getting to that lesson, whatever outside forces, because our kids are, if I'm just transparent, they go through a lot. Parental households, I'll just be honest, they aren't what they used to be. You have kids, being dads and moms and going without food. And if a kid is hungry, you can't expect him to focus or her to focus, right? So I think there are a lot of outside factors. So I would say sometimes those outside factors can be, taxing to deal with, because you have to, kind of rein in that focus. You have to deal with whatever outside things are going on, so that so you can have their full attention, because people don't care how much you know until they know that you care. So yeah, that would be my perspective on that. The hardest part would be not, in the classroom, but the things that are happening outside of the classroom to the children that are creating a lot of pressure on them mentally, so that it's hard for them to focus.
Well, let me follow that up real quick, and then we'll get over to you, Courtney, on your opinion. Do you, and you don't have to have an answer to this, but just to satisfy my curiosity, do you have any proposed solutions to help combat that, the outside structure of the family and things like that could?
Man, that's
easy. Well, that's a deep one, but honestly, the simplest answer is fathers in homes. When a father is in a home, I can tell. I don't have to know the kid. When fathers are in homes, sons are comfortable dealing with their emotions, because they have an older figure that they can look to and say, yo, what, dad was just going the other day. He didn't spaz out, so I don't have to spaz out. But on the other hand, you can tell when they don't have that. You can tell when the young lady doesn't. They have a mother who's doing everything within her power to keep the household together, but there's nothing like having a father in the home. When a father's in the home, not only the poverty rate goes down. Now, you don't have just one income, you have another income, right? You also have moral structure. Men are less likely to put up with nonsense if we're transparent, right? So you have the moral structure, you have the financial structure that allows a child to simply be a child and to learn. So from my perspective, one of the greatest ways that you can, make a difference is simply fathers being present. Even if you can't be in the home, just be in the life of a young man or a young lady and make a difference. So yeah, that's my perspective on that.
Man, I could not agree with you more. And we could go so much further down that topic and all of the benefits that come with having a father figure in the home. But we're going to save that for another episode, because that can get deep, man. But I feel you on that one. So what about you, Courtney? What do you think the hardest part about teaching younger children about financial literacy is?
I think naturally, and adults struggle with this too. The comparison, the social media and the glamorization of, having the latest, being on trend all the time, or just trying to keep up with your peers, right? We all are on social media, the highlight reel or TikTok, for the younger generation. So, it's kind of hard to teach kids, like, okay, before you spend money on those Jordans or Yeezys and stuff, make sure you invest a portion of that. And so trying to get them to see the benefit of, assets over liabilities, right? That's, one of the ads we're running right now, Kidvestors, is, one of the clips is actually showing DJ, which is one of the characters, at a store looking at a pair of shoes that he wants to buy really, really, really bad. And he's like, well, you know what? Let me invest in Nike first. Then over time, maybe I can use some of that money down the line to then buy these J's. So it's like showing them the importance and making it still culturally relevant to show, like, we're not saying you don't have to or not shop or not, spend on yourself or enjoy yourself. We're just saying prioritize. So I think that's, in my opinion, what is a little difficult is showing them, not to try to keep up with your peers and spend all your money, but get in the practice of investing and paying yourself first.
Yeah, and I think that that's a big focus on teaching delayed gratification. Would you say that's
Right.
so? Well, I'm gonna follow up with that. What are your tips to help teachers or parents teach their younger children delayed gratification?
Having those conversations, like saying no, telling your child, especially, if they're working age, make a requirement like, hey, before you buy this, I want you to open this investment account. I want you to put a portion of your earnings into this account. I want you to practice. Then you can go and buy what you want. So it takes some leadership and some, basically the parent putting their foot down and saying, hey, let's do it this way, guiding them in those decisions and having conversations with them. Let them, maybe choose some of their investments, research with them. Don't necessarily be a dictator and say you're going to invest in this and invest in that, but guide them and let them be a part of the conversation so they are interested in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was gonna follow up with that. You kind of answered the question, but it's like, how do you? Because I mean, at least for me, I'm still fairly young. When someone tells me to do something,
Right.
I have like a rebellious kind of tendency. Look, I feel like Darius looking at me like, yeah, I feel that, right? So yeah, how do you? But you kind of answered it. Go for more of an inspiration than a dictatorship, and
Right.
that's a way to avoid like a rebellion. You think that?
Right. Let them be a part of the conversation and the decision making instead of telling them what to actually invest in and to do.
And also as a parent, you get to have what we call a controlled experiment, right? That means you get to influence certain results. So let's say you have a child who's listening and a child who's not. So let's say the child who's listening has met certain threshold that you've advised them to. You know what? You may splurge on that child, right? I appreciate that. This is beautiful part about parenting. You get to kind of control the results, right? So I think that you can also kind of use your financial influence a little bit. In fact, you can match. Hey, if you invest this amount, I'll match 100% or 50% of your investment. Right. So now they have, double or triple what the non-listening, sibling may have. And that sibling is going to notice that. Right. So we can just things like that to kind of, encourage camaraderie. And also, I'm just aware of knuckleheads like me. I was a complete knucklehead. But when I run into a wall and I see something like that, that'll get my attention, and that will cause me to kind of want to act.
Healthy competition.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'm with you. I'm a knucklehead, right? And they might be like, oh, Courtney, they're terrible parents. They're picking favorites. No. I'm influencing them. Okay. If you cooperate, you get more than if you're rebellious. I mean, that's how life treats you, right?
Right.
That's how life treats you. If you cooperate, if you're a team player, if you can incorporate into a team very well, you will reap more benefits than the person who is, by their lonesome and they're rebellious and they don't want to follow rules.
Right. Because the world doesn't work that way. When you don't follow rules in the real world, there's, consequences, whether we like them to or not. So, yeah.
Yeah. God, I love that. I love that. So let's talk about, because another thing that really intrigued, piqued my interest in this whole Kidvestor thing. I love the illustrations and the storytelling in you guys' short videos on your Twitter and YouTube. So let's talk about, why is it so important for us to be able to see people who look like us being enthusiastic about something like financial literacy? Because you don't see many black cartoon characters or even real life characters focusing on financial literacy.
Right. I think because we can know it's possible. I think the reason why a lot of us grew up wanting to be, an athlete or a musician is because that's what we saw. Yeah. We saw people who looked like us, who were rich and wealthy, and that's what they did. They were either playing basketball, football, or had a mic in their head. We didn't really see a lot of successful people who look like us that were not doing those things. And so it was important for us to show that you can still be extremely wealthy and successful just by owning a business or by investing and being diligent investors over time, of course, depending on how much you put in, but we won't get into the math and all of that stuff, but that it's possible that you can be the next Robert Smith. You can be these other famous businessmen that never had a basketball in their hand, And so we just wanted to show people, kids specifically, what was possible. And I really just believe representation matters. It was when we started investing in real estate, I knew people invest in real estate, but in my head, I was like, okay, rich white guys. It wasn't until I actually started seeing, oh, there's black people out here doing this. It made it like more real and more attainable, in my opinion. And so that is our goal for Kidvestors.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about being relatable. When you see someone who looks like you, talks like you, walks like you, doing something that you want to do, that's inspiration to show that it's possible.
Right.
Someone said something to me that it struck a nerve, and I'll never forget it. But when I started investing and I started getting into this financial literacy stuff, and getting educated, investing in real estate, they said that I was doing white people stuff, and it struck a nerve. And it's like, but then I thought, I was like, I'm not going to sit here and fault this person, because most of the time, all they see is white people doing this stuff.
That's good. Right? That's the truth. So
it's their truth. And even though it's not accurate, it's all they've ever been exposed to. So when you expose them to someone who's black like yourselves or like me, who's doing this stuff, it's like, okay, wait a minute. It's not just for white people. It's not just for men. It's also women can do it. And that's why I love the illustrations and using black cartoons, because it's us. It is us. We can see ourselves in their shoes.
Right. And it was intentional.
Yeah, and there ain't nothing wrong with that. I mean, we need more of it. We really need more of it. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you guys kind of a personal question. I didn't plan for it, but as we're talking, it's just I have to ask, because I like learning from people who are more experienced than me in things. And I'll start with you, Darius. What do you do now, and what do you plan on doing in the future to raise your children to not have an entitled mentality?
I think you answered your own question, but you didn't realize it. Raise them, right? That means, so I'm about to show my hand a little bit, right? I'm not necessarily a fan of, especially during the formative years, kind of sending our children off. I think, first of all, there's only 24 hours in a day. So when you get up in the morning, you go to work, you send the kids to school. Right around 3-ish, you go and get your kids from school. You guys, by the time you get home, it's probably 4:30. They start on homework, right? Then they probably are done around 6:30. It's time to eat. By the time you eat, it's time to shower and all that stuff. And then it's time to go to bed. What happens is there's no actual parenting taking place, right? So just figuring out a way. And me, myself, my children, whether I'm at a property, whether I'm at a job or whatever, they're with me as much as possible. Even a lot of times I'm here at home. I'm learning stuff along with them, our ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, and punctuation and all that stuff. We're learning that. We're learning it together. To me, that's the best way, because they get to see dad not only succeed, but they get to see dad fail. They get to see dad get frustrated, and I have to apologize to mom. Hey, babe, I am so sorry. I should not have, said this or that. And when they see that, guess what? Now they realize, hey, you know what? You're going to fail sometime. I don't use the word mistakes because it gives yourself too much credit. We're going to fail sometimes. Take ownership, get up, dust your behind off, apologize, and keep moving forward. To me, that is a cure-all for entitlement, because when you send your kids off and let's say you have a little bit of influence, you can influence the private school to, treat them this way or that way. And now they have that last name that teachers know, hey, they better not treat you a certain way, or else, certain funds will be cut off, or dad's going to come down there. That's the way you breed that sort of entitlement. But that's just my perspective on that.
I like there was an actual clip that kind of went viral. It was I think it was Shaq. Oh. And he was like, I'm rich. Something to the fact like, I'm rich, my kids are not rich.
I know exactly what
like
you're
that.
talking about.
And a lot of people, from what I saw, people were like, well, what do you mean? Blah, blah, blah. I felt like a lot of people were coming at him negatively for saying that, but I got what he was saying. He was basically saying, I'm not raising entitled kids. Like, I will help you, if you come to me with a business plan, I'm here and I have this wealth to share with you and guide you, but I'm not here to give handouts. I think there's a difference between giving a hand up and a handout. I'm all about giving my kids a hand up, but I want them to still learn the value of hard work. And so I think when you were just giving your child, giving without raising them and showing them the importance of still working hard, and that mom and dad are not going to come save you every time. You may have to fall or fail sometimes, so you'll learn, but I'm still going to be in your corner helping you and supporting you emotionally. That's kind of how you prevent that entitlement.
Yeah, I definitely, I know the exact clip you're talking about, Shaq, and I 100% agree with him too. It's basically like, just because I ended up becoming successful doesn't mean I owe you anything. Just because you're my child, I don't owe you anything. The world does not owe you anything. You have to earn your own way. But that doesn't mean, just like you just emphasized, I can still give you a hand up. I can still help you. I can guide you. I can do these things. And if you are worthy of obtaining this wealth once I'm gone, then that's a conversation to have. But just because you're my child doesn't mean you're owed it.
Right.
I definitely.
Detriment.
Now, the coolest thing what happened as I got older, I began to meet with older parents who just outright said that they weren't leaving their inheritance to their children. And it's like, because their children showed like that they would squander this, whether that be drugs or just nonsense. They decided to give it all to charity, or give it to the church, or their dog. Literally, I'm not joking, or to the state. Give your money to the state, what? But they would rather do that than to empower their children to, I guess, buy more drugs or continue to live a lifestyle that they just weren't proud of. So, yeah.
Well, there's a saying, wealth amplifies who you are. So if you're a happy, responsible person, gaining wealth, you're just going to become a happier, more responsible person. But if you're, unfortunately, if you're on drugs or you have addictions, all that's going to do is amplify that. And the last thing you want to do is amplify bad behavior, or behavior that you consider to be bad, whatever that means to a person. And that could be anything. That could be drugs. It could be, look, this guy's just going to go buy 1,000 cars when I could give it to this charity to go, help with research and development to cure cancer, or anything, Yeah. So, so I love what you just said, Darius. Is like, all it's going to do is amplify whatever you are. And to your credit, your kids are who you raise them to be.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, at the ultimate end of the day, it does fall back on you as a parent. And you have to take responsibility for that. And it's hard to, I would imagine it's hard to tell your child, like, look, you're not living a righteous life. You're not meeting these benchmarks that I think are worth it. Therefore, I'm not going to leave you these millions of dollars we've accumulated because I don't think you're responsible enough for it. And it's hard, but it's necessary. If you love them, it's necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love does not look like giving your child whatever they want just because they want it. I also saw a statistic that said, I think, the second generation is usually, wealth is usually lost by the second generation. It's because I think a lot of parents have not figured out how to, be that hand up instead of that hand out. And they only entitled children who usually end up squandering the hard-earned work and wealth that the first generation made and built. And so, yeah, it's definitely.
And my opinion on that is get down to the brass tacks, raise your kids. Don't let other people do that. You take advantage of the influence that you have, because that influence won't last forever. But during that time period that you are a primary influence, don't take that for granted. Don't be in your phone. Don't be, out with the guys. Like, you need to be taking advantage of that, because that influence is going to reflect, your parenting capability. Because when that kid start acting out, you can't blame nobody but yourself at the end of the day. You let his children, you let his friends, you let her friends raise her. You let the school system raise her. So,
and this is not to, you fail as a parent, because your kids are still going to be kids. Like, even parents who are very present, kids are still going to be curious kids. At the end of the day, they're going to disappoint you. They're going to do things they're not supposed to, but they should be able to still come to you as a parent. You should still be able to guide them back on the right track.
But it's all about having that influence. You have to be someone they want to look up to.
Right.
And the only way you can become that is by being present.
Exactly. And the only way to be present in the way you truly want to, which is why we went, the way we did, is through financial freedom. That time. Think about how many parents want to be present to do that for their kids, but they physically can't because they're tied to a job to provide. And so it's literally a cycle. I can't be present for my kids. My kids are out here wilding out. I can't even be physically present because I'm tied to this, because if I don't work, my family doesn't eat. And so money impacts us in more ways than we like to give credit for, which is why it's so important to know how to manage your money, invest your money, so you can be free to focus on the things that are really important, like your family, which goes back to why we want to get this education to them as soon as possible, is so they can learn that earlier than what a lot of adults have.
Get out of the rat race.
Get out the rat race early.
Get out of the rat. You are 100% right on that. So, guys, what are some of your short-term goals for Kidvestors? Like, where do you want this thing to go? Or where do you expect it to go within the next 6 months to a year?
6 months to a year, I would say more charter schools and boarding schools, and also we're looking to get our first county contract. That means with the county, like we stay in Jefferson County. I don't know what county you stay in, but get a district or county-wide contract where we are able to guarantee that children within this county get exposed to this vital information regarding financial literacy. So within the next 6 months and on, more charter schools, more boarding schools, and probably most importantly, more public schools, specifically at the county level, to make sure that we're able to influence as many public schools within that county as possible.
That's phenomenal, man. I really hope that works out, because that's a big step. It's one thing to have it in specific schools, but to make it a county or even a state mandate, like that is where the real, because again, I just feel like you can teach it, but it's not going to be retained if your friends aren't talking about it, if it's not hip, if it's not cool. But you guys are trying to make it cool because
Right.
our brain is not made to think exponentially. So
Mhm.
90% of the population does not understand how compound interest works.
Right.
So when they learn, it's like, what?
Mhm.
Why has no one told me about this in the umpteen years I've been on this earth? Like, mom, why didn't you tell me about it? So it's one of those things, like, it is absolutely mind-boggling,
Mhm.
but unfortunately we have to get people interested in it in order for it to really, impact them. So what about some of the long-term goals for Kidvestors within that you hope to accomplish within the next 5 to 10 years? Like, where do you want this thing to go? If you just could snap your fingers and this was the way it was, where would you want this to go?
So Darius said charter schools in our first county, and I would say long term, we want them in all counties. So like by 2030, it's 2022, in 8 years, we would love not only for all 50 states to mandate a financial literacy curriculum of sorts, but for Kidvestors to be that go-to resource that meets that personal finance requirement.
Mhm.
And so I don't think we covered this. So for Kidvestors, is this something that you want to expand? Because it seems as though, and I could be wrong, I could have been missing out on some of the content, but this doesn't seem like a high school type curriculum where it's that far advanced that it would. These are you're teaching very simple, basic, anyone can grasp it type of things, at least in the videos I've seen. So what does Kidvestors look like now? Like, if you
Mhm.
had an age range that you cater to at this moment?
So right now we actually cater to all ages. So we teach the same concepts, but in different ways, depending on grade level.
Yeah.
So, a 12th grader, for example, in addition to, the courses that we also have workbooks. And so the workbook a 12th grader would get is different than the workbook the third grader would get.
Mhm.
So they're still learning about the stock market, but one's a little more advanced than the other. So we're going to dive a lot deeper, in high school than we are, in elementary and middle school. So we have different formats of each of the core areas depending on grade level.
Gotcha. Okay, so that was my bad.
Oh,
Yeah, no, but that's awesome, and of course that makes 100% sense, right? Like, you don't want to teach a third grader the benefits of a Roth IRA, right? Like you're gonna lose them. You're gonna lose them at Roth.
Right.
So it's like, but that's something, a 12th grader, although they might not care, their hormones are raging and they want to go to lunch, but it's much more possible to be retained at a 12th grade level than it is. But also, you don't want to be teaching a 12th grader how to sell lemonade and save money. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's awesome.
What's crazy is some of the personal finance, I would even content that I've seen for high schoolers is just that. It's the basic stuff that when you ask, like, what was our introduction to financial literacy? It's the basic stuff: save money, lemonade stand, start a business, at least to my knowledge. And this is why I love Kidvestors. I'm probably biased because we actually do a deep dive. Like, I don't even know if there's even content out there that even talks about real estate investing. Actually how to buy real estate outside of just your primary residence. We're actual real estate investors. So we have a whole curriculum literally teaching you how to invest in real estate, the steps to go about that, how to look at comps, how to get a realtor involved, how to get bids from contractors. Like, we're literally going through step by step. Like, people aren't doing that. We're going step by step from a person who knows nothing about the stock market to buying their first stock, building their investment portfolio. We're not just glossing over like, okay, the 401k is just a retirement account. No, we're like walking you through the steps. And so that's why we like Kidvestors as well, because it's really teaching you how to invest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's phenomenal that like it's crazy to think. So I speak from a very privileged point to where I figured out investing early. So I have the power of time on my side. I'm only 23 and I'm already learning about, I purchase rental properties and things like that. And it's crazy to think that there are 50 or 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds that are just learning this stuff.
Right.
But now you guys are creating content where you can learn it at the age of 18. Imagine the amount of wealth, if you actually take it and absorb it, the amount of wealth you can accumulate very early on just by doing things like house hacking or buying rental property or, all these different tactics for real estate investing or even stock market investing. So it's just crazy. It's crazy to me to think. And of course, I don't fault people who are older because information is now more accessible than ever.
Right.
But it sucks that not, and I know that not all children or young adults will take advantage of it.
Right.
And that's unfortunately the sour part of the story, but that's not the focus. It's the focus is on the ones that do get something from it, and they do inspire their parents, like you guys were talking about, and they do cause that domino to fall and start creating generational wealth. So it's like the fact you guys are undeniably, with what you're doing now, you are creating millionaires. Maybe they're not millionaires today, but they're millionaires at some point, as long as they absorb your content and they implement it in their life. So it's a crazy thought to think like you are creating millionaires by the things you're doing today, and you'll probably never meet them, but it's still happening.
Right.
Oh, that's awesome.
Crazy thought. I actually like that.
Yeah, I really want to get into you guys' because I want to know your personal story about how you started in real estate, stuff like that. I just don't think we will be able to squeeze it all into one episode. So before I get into the final questions, I want to openly invite you guys back on at a later date, and we can go through like your real estate, because boy, I love me some real estate. Right? I love investing, but I love me some real estate. Boy, oh boy, I'm about to get pre-approved in a little bit and get my third rental. But yeah, I want to openly invite you guys back if that's something you're up to hear your story.
Of course.
No problem.
But let's go ahead and get into the final questions of the podcast. And of course, these are the same questions I ask every single guest just to get to know you. So Dariuss, we will start with you with question number 1. Everyone has their own definition of what it means to have financial peace. What is your definition?
To be able to serve my family and community without being concerned about money. So freedom of time, in the sense that I can serve my family, I can serve my community, and not be concerned about bills and I don't know, and everything else that has to do with money. Just being able to serve freely and not be worried about that.
And you know what? That brings up something you said earlier that I meant to hit on, but it's like there's this perception out there that wealthy people are evil. There are people who have that perception. But what you realize is it is so much easier to help people when you have money than it is when you don't. And it irritates me. It irritates me down to the soul, because it's like you have the ability to go to a restaurant, get awesome service, and leave an astonishing tip and change a waiter's life or waitress's life just because you feel like it, just because of the wealth you're building through real estate and stock and stuff like that. So it's like, I don't want to get on my soapbox, man, but wealth gives you so many more opportunities to give and to bless other people. And I just want to put that out there. You mentioned it earlier, and I didn't hit on it, but I love that you keep bringing that up. It's like, you don't want to be wealthy to run the world. Like, you don't want to gain this passive income to send yourself off to space. That's not your purpose. Your purpose is to build this passive income. That way you can spend your time and your resources helping other people and giving back in that way. It affords you opportunities that most people will never have.
Right.
I'm gonna get off my soapbox. Courtney, let's go to you. Everyone has their own definition of what it means to have financial peace. What is your definition?
Mine is pretty similar to his. For me, it's definitely just being able to be present with my family. Like I have two little babies, a almost 3-year-old and almost 2-year-old. Well, yeah.
Almost something like that.
Y'all know that. Almost 3-year-old and a almost 2-year-old, and I was talking to my husband the other day, and I was like, I really feel for the women who give birth and they have to be back at work at 6 weeks. You know, like I could not imagine. I was fortunate that I did not have to do that. Since I left my job in 2018, I've literally been at home. I've been able to be a fully present mother, and you can't put a price on that. And so for me, that's my big why, is to be fully present and available for my family without worrying about being at someone's job and missing milestones in important times in their life, in these formative years at that. Like I want to be there. And so that's what financial peace looks like for me, is just literally being able to be present with my family.
You know, I think something you said goes completely underrated. And it's the fact that when and I've never experienced either of them, and some I will never experience, right? I will never experience what it's like to give birth. Right? So I can't really speak on the pain of that, but I haven't experienced having to deal with a death and then having to go back to work because you just don't have the option to go through the emotions. And so I always compare the two as like I already told my wife, like, once we have children and you give birth, like the last thing we're worried about is you going back to work. Like we have much more things to worry about. And it's the same thing if you lose a loved one, right? The last thing you want to have to do is lose a loved one and then go to work on Monday.
Right.
You know, and having financial peace alleviates that dilemma. And unfortunately, so many people don't have that option.
Right.
But they can.
No, that's true. They can. I like that. They can.
They can. But it starts with the knowledge and know-how.
And it starts with Kidvestors. Okay, Courtney, back to you. So if there are listeners out there that want to start building wealth and they have no clue where to get started, what would you tell them?
Ooh, man. I feel like that's a loaded question.
It's so general.
I'm big on fundamentals. So I'm like, I'm not going to teach a person how to invest until I teach them how to manage their money, right? So
say it again.
I'm not going to teach a person.
Say that again. Say that again.
As big as I am on investing, I'm not going to teach. Investing is not going to be my first step with you. Like if a person comes to me tomorrow and say, Courtney, I want to learn how to start building wealth, I'm probably not going to tell them to invest in the stock market tomorrow. I'm going to tell them, okay, we need to learn how to manage your money. What's coming in? What are you spending? What are some things you can get rid of? Cut your expenses, increase your income. Then once you get a handle on that, let's start working on investing the difference. Now that you got a handle on budgeting, maybe I'm a little old school. I still have the mindset, like I like to still have a stash of cash in a regular savings account for emergencies, just so I don't have to go and sell any positions or anything like that if something happens. I know that's not everybody's, cup of tea, but I still like to have 3 to 6 months of, cash reserves, even though inflation is rising, yes, but I want that immediate cash. So that way, when something happens, when life happens, I don't have to sell anything. I can just take care of business. So I'm big on money management, saving, then let's go into investing. Okay. You may not have a whole lot of money. Let's start with index funds. I'm not going to start talking about individual stock picks right now. Let's get some, BTI, QQQ, those things, some stable index funds that I think that will do well in your portfolio long term. And then, we might get into even some real estate, house hacking before you get your first primary residence. Then we'll start talking about investment properties. So it's stages, but people have to have that knowledge and fundamentals. But sometimes I think we start in the deep end. But if you don't have that mindset shift and you don't have discipline, none of the other stuff matters. So you have to have that mindset shift and discipline first, and the basic knowledge of money management before you start investing in the fancy stuff.
I couldn't have said it. No. I love it. And I just want to very strongly emphasize something you said. You have an emergency fund for when something happens. She did not say if, people. She said when, because we don't know when it's going to rain, but we know it's going to rain. Okay?
Exactly.
So it's not an if something happens. You don't have an emergency fund just in case if something happens. No. You have an emergency fund for when something happens, because something will happen. I have to emphasize that 100 times because it is so underrated.
Yeah.
But Darius,
some people are like, oh, you don't need, I'm sorry. Some people are like, oh, you don't need one. You can just take your contributions out your Roth IRA, or you can just sell some of your positions out your brokerage, or, you can trade your crypto, sell your crypto so you can have cash. But it's like, why would I invest my money just to liquidate it? Like, the whole purpose was to let it grow. So I want that money to keep growing. So I don't want to sell anything when something happens. Sorry.
No. You're 100% right on that one, Courtney. So Darius, if there are listeners out there that want to start building wealth and they have no clue where to get started, what would you tell them?
I mean, I don't want to say what she said. Crawl before you walk. Get your fundamentals together. Once you get your fundamentals together, that's when you'll feel like that's when you build up the wind to be able to do more. So again, crawl before you walk. Get your money, get your management together, get your budgets together, get your discipline together, so you can not only make budgets but stick to them. And once that creates a sort of discipline in you that once you start to see, stacks starting to build up over the years, now you got your emergency fund. So now you got a little money you can play with, right? I always say don't invest money that you're not ready to lose. So once you got your emergency stashed away because you've been budgeting, you've been disciplined with your budgeting, now you can start and do the more fancy stuff. You can open up your brokerage. You can do different things with the Roth IRA. You can start doing a little fancy stuff. But before you get to the fancy stuff, make sure you get the basics, just like she said.
Wealth is a slow game.
And it's all about the base, right? If you're building a house, if you don't have a solid base, then everything above that is prone to collapse. So if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you start investing all of your money and you have this high interest credit card debt and this payday lender you haven't paid, you're building on a terrible base, and it's all going to crumble down. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but it will happen if you never fix the base. So I love it. I mean, there's nothing nuanced about what you just said. It's just the truth.
Yeah. You would be surprised how much flack sometimes, especially from other investors. It's like, your money is losing, value as long as it's sitting in the account. I'm like, okay.
I'm gonna be 100% honest with you, Courtney. I have never heard a wealthy person ever say like you shouldn't have a cash stack. It's always people who are not. No offense. I okay, that came off wrong. But it's the people, you should people. Like those are the people. I don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about. All right, Darius. If there's one thing you could advise everyone to avoid doing to build wealth, what would that be?
Avoid showing off.
You knew you were going to say that.
keeping up with the Joneses and trying to portray something that you're not, be where you are. If you need to budget to, eat out, if you can only afford to eat out, once a week or once every 2 weeks, just be grateful that you're able to eat out, period. Don't try and put it on credit, if you can only go on vacation, once a year, don't try and, I have this credit card and I can get all these points. No, just stick to that one thing. So my advice would be, do your best to be present where you are, embrace it with humility. Don't try and look like something that you are clearly not, because it will catch up to you.
Phenomenal. Same question to you, Courtney. What is something you would advise everyone to avoid doing to build wealth?
Piggyback off what he said, basically act your wage.
Hold on, you gonna trigger some people with that one now.
Act your wage. I think especially on the age of social media, like he was saying, we're so eager to try to keep up and charge credit cards and try to live this life that you really can't afford to be living. And then it catches up to you. And then you find yourself in high consumer, high interest credit card debt, payday loans, high car notes, mortgages you can't barely afford, having to work, overtime and do all of these things because you were trying to keep up with the lifestyle, versus if you would have just acted your wage and took those, built a solid foundation, learn how to live within your means, save, decrease unnecessary costs, invest the difference, and build slowly, you could avoid some financial heartache.
Yeah.
And so, act your wage.
Phenomenal. I agree. People gonna be triggered by that with act your wage, but it's true. I mean, everything you just said is spot on. Like the only person, because the thing is, like, no one really cares. Like they might care when they're swiping on social media and they're like, oh, he got a nice car. And then they're just going to continue swiping.
Right.
But you're stuck with that car payment for umpteen years. So it's like, really, who, yeah, you're
still paying on a 2007 BMW or something like that.
That you pay interest only payments on and stuff. Like, all right. Courtney, if there's someone out there that doesn't believe they can reach financial peace due to their age, race, religion, sexual orientation, etc., what would you say to change their mind?
This might sound cliche, but it's possible that we all, well, I want to be so careful when I say this because I want to be so careful with the word choices I use. So I acknowledge that some cultures have more privilege than others. Not all of us started at the same playing field for obvious historical reasons. But that does not mean we have to accept that mindset and stay there, right? Black people, we know we have a history in this country of slavery, redlining, everything possible tried to keep us back, but we don't have to stay there. We can implement the knowledge that is freely given to us now, especially in the age of the internet. It's possible. Like I said, it might sound cliche, but it really is. We didn't come from rich parents or super rich background, and I wouldn't even consider us super wealthy yet. We have a ways to go. We have, goals we're trying to reach ourselves, but we're definitely not where we used to be. And that's because we did not let the things that could have held us back hold us back. We put it in our mindset that this is attainable, this is achievable, we have the knowledge, we can execute it. It's possible, we can do it.
But I mean, what you just said, right? You just said we aren't where we want to be, but we're also not where we started. Isn't that the beauty of all of this?
Yeah.
It's like, if you look at your, as long as you are better than you were a year ago,
Mhm.
you're winning. Like, you are winning the game. And that can be anything. That can be fitness goals, financial goals, mental goals, educational goals, whatever that X amount, that deciding factor is. As long as you are better than you were a year ago, or you were better than you were 2 years ago, you are winning the game.
Mhm.
So it's like, whether, let's just say your net worth grew over 5 years by $3,000, that
Mhm.
you're winning. Like, yes, I like to use the analogy. We all have our own set of obstacles. I have my obstacles, and I might have three. Courtney, you might have your own obstacles. You might have five. Darius, you
Mhm.
might have your own obstacles, but you might have seven. I don't care. That doesn't mean you don't run the race. Because as
Right.
soon as you don't run the race, as soon as you don't participate, you've lost the game.
Right.
You've given up. You become hopeless. And I think that's like the worst thing that can happen to a human being, is they become hopeless.
Right. That's real. That's so real.
So, Darius, if there's someone out there that doesn't believe that they can reach financial peace due to their age, their race, religion, sexual orientation, etc., what would you say to change their mind?
You can do whatever you want to as long as you're willing to work for it. And it will be that simple and sweet.
Yeah, I mean, hey, cut straight to the point. I mean, it's true. Like, you're not saying something that's outlandish. I mean, as long as you're willing to work for it, you can achieve anything as long as you're willing to work for it.
Yeah. Simple. Yes, sir.
That's real.
Well, Courtney, Darius, I really, really, really appreciate you guys joining me today. This has been such an awesome interview. Where can people find out more about you guys?
Follow us on all platforms for the most part. Follow Kidvestors on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. Kidvestors, KID Vestors, VESTORS. And if you want to follow us personally and like look at our own journey, we are Pettway Estates, PETTWAY Estates, plural like real estate, also on all social media platforms.
And of course, guys, I'm going to link all of their social media, every single one. It's going to be in the show notes below. So you don't have to go through typing all that in. And all you got to do is just go down and click it, and you guys will pull up all of their social media. Guys, I really appreciate you guys coming on. This interview was a little bit longer, but I enjoyed absolutely every second of it. And I already said, and I'm going to say it again, I really would love you guys to come back on in the future to talk about your personal journey, because that deserves an episode all of its own, right? I don't want to have to try and cram it into one, because it's phenomenal what you guys are doing, and it's phenomenal where you guys are going. So I just want to, again, thank you guys so much for joining me on today's episode. And I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of this.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We always appreciate you for having us. So thanks.
Yes.
Of course. But that's it for us, guys. We will catch you guys later. Bye, guys.
Bye.
And guys, that was my interview with the founders of Kidvestor, Darius and Courtney. I mean, I really hope you guys enjoyed that. I mean, I love to see people who look like us teaching people like us. I love their illustrations. I love their cartoons. I love everything about what they are doing. You know, I resonate so much with their purpose, because Kidvestors is kind of like a premature Gen Z Mon-E, right? Like right before Gen Z is the children. And I think financial literacy starts early, because the power of compound interest and the amount of momentum you can gain from doing things like not wasting time in college if you don't need to, starting to buy stocks, index funds, looking at real estate. These are all phenomenal things to learn at such a young age. And I think targeting children that are little sponges is literally the best source of your time when it comes to that. So if you guys have children, or Maybe if you're on a school board or if you're a part of the decision-making process, reach out to these guys. See if you can get their curriculum in your school. They said they service anywhere from K to 12, you know? So they have a very, very wide variety of products to cover every age bracket. So there's no reason why this shouldn't be in every single school across the United States. And that's what I hope for them. And I'm sure, you know, they keep putting in this hard work. They are going to get there. So it's absolutely amazing to be a part of that journey and to have them on the podcast to hear about that. But with that being said, guys, I do want to just mention, I do still offer financial coaching, and you can schedule that down in my Calendly below. I offer free consultations before the actual coaching to even see if it's right for you. Of course, and also, guys, whatever you're listening on, whether it's on Facebook, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever you're listening on, it would really mean a lot if you guys left rating and reviews on the show and let me know what you think, you know, and this will help get the show out to other people. Also, if you guys didn't know, I do upload the full videos on YouTube, so you guys can go subscribe to Gen Z Money on YouTube. I'd really appreciate that. And of course, I post clips every single week on our social medias, Gen Z Money on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You guys can follow us there. And all of that, of course, is linked in the show notes below with, of course, all of Kidvestors content where you can find them and things like that. But I'm going to get up out of here, guys. This was an awesome interview. I'm your host, James Bowman. And always remember, you're only as secure as your ability to perform. So spend your life accumulating assets that can perform for you. Later, guys.